This is Joe Wong. Welcome to the Trap Set. During the age of social distancing, we're recording by phone and releasing new episodes every day. Today's guest is Mike Bordin, a drummer best known as a founding member of Faith No More and for his tenure with Ozzy Osbourne. Mike delivers remarkably unique rhythmic patterns with unparalleled power. In short, he's one of the all-time greats. I reached Mike at his home in the Bay Area.
Hello.
Hey, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I wanted to mention this to you, and I think I did when we first met a few years ago. But I was born in 1980, so I started being able to have a little bit of disposable income around 1990, 89, 90, because I had, an allowance and I had chores to do around the house. And one of the first things that I ever bought with my own money was the epic single with Edge of the World on the B-side.
Oh, nice,
and
thank you.
It was absolutely life-changing at the time, and I basically wore that tape out. I told this story to Roddy because I played a show, like a improv show with him last summer, and he rolled his eyes at me. But I wonder...
I'll say this. I'll say thank you very much for that. It also changed my life too, just so you don't feel too alone and isolated in that regard.
I don't feel alone in it because I know lots of people had that experience with that album, and that song. But what was a song that changed your life in that way during your formative years?
I mean, listening. That's the thing for me. It's like it's always been kind of a trail. It's never been just sort of one thing and the door blasted open and it's a whole new world. I mean, I think it's always been a series of doors that you walk through and it kind of on your journey. I mean, the first stuff I remember hearing, wasn't rock music at all. It was music from my parents, and so maybe that changed my life, or maybe the fact that then my dad started buying Beatles records, and then I started hearing that. Maybe that changed my life, But the real thing that kind of, I don't know, sent me to where I am and where I've been on the path that's taken me this last 30, 40 years is it's got to have, been hearing Black Sabbath. I mean, I knew about him as a kid. I'd heard, everybody had heard Paranoid or War Pigs or Iron Man especially, but I remember, and it wasn't, I guess, so much hearing it. That's what I'm kind of getting at. It was more. I remember being in Los Angeles at my grandma's house in in April 1974 or 5. I think it was 5. So I was probably 12 years old, and watching in concert on Channel 7 at 11:30 on Friday night, and they showed California Jam. And they showed Sabbath, and they showed Sabbath doing War Pigs.
And for folks that didn't grow up in the California area, what was California Jam?
California Jam was a show that they had at the Ontario Motor Speedway. It was a massive, 300,000 person gig that they had. And it was from the top down. It was Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, I think, and then other bands, Rare Earth, Black Oak, Arkansas, Earth, Wind, and Fire. The Eagles, I believe, played. But it was a massive outdoor festival. And, watching Deep Purple do Burn, with David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes just in the band was amazing to me. Watching Richie Blackmore, beat up this TV camera for getting too close to him, and exploding his amps and burning half of his hair off, was amazing. But watching Sabbath with no pyrotechnics, with no, no special effect, no nothing. Just watching them play during the daylight, just in the afternoon with no lights, watching them do that set. They only broadcast, I think, 4 songs. And that, I think, really honestly probably changed my life as much or more than anything. Because physically watching what they did, because I'd heard the music at that point. I knew what it was about, and I owned the record. But to see what it was about, to see what they were doing was just, I'll never forget it. That's one of those moments for me, is like that really opened a door to sort of the path that I've taken in those, years since. That was a big deal to me.
Did you identify with the drums in particular at that point, or was it just the overall thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing I always say is, people have asked over the years or whatever about, how'd you start playing the drums and this and that? And, that was a different thing entirely, because I was sitting in a room with a very, very good friend of mine. And the very good friend of mine said, I'm going to start playing bass. And I said, cool, I'll play drums. But it was instinctive. I mean, I never thought about that before that. It's just all of my heroes at that point, like a lot of people in 1974, 5, 6, were guitar players, because, that was sort of the quarterback position, the wide receiver position. That was the a lot of times the focus, especially in rock and metal. I mean, yeah, a singer stands there up front, that's fine, but you think about the guitar players in these metal bands that I grew up with, and those were the people that really impressed me. Those were the people that I had posters on my wall of. But sitting there in the room, I was sitting in the room with Cliff Burton. Cliff and I were hanging out, as we did, because we were school friends. And he said, "Yeah, I'm going to play bass." So I said, "Cool. I'm going to play the drums," and we both did. To varying effect and that, but it wasn't planned. It just, I don't know.
And then you created a band together called Easy Street, right?
We played together a little bit, we did. We started, and it wasn't so long after that.
This was in high school?
Yeah, freshman, 13. Yeah, it had to have been just in high school, yeah, because I wasn't old enough to drive, and he wasn't either, for sure. And we played together for a little bit, just sort of ourselves and anybody that we could find. And then, yeah, he had heard that there was a band in the town sort of next to us that needed a rhythm section. And that was that band, Easy Street. Yeah, so then we played in that band. But we played together for, I want to say 2 years, probably before that, just trying to figure it out and get our feet underneath us, just sort of doing it. I mean, that said, I got to be fair. He was always kind of together, and he kind of came out fully formed. I mean, he was amazingly good from the beginning. And anybody that knew him or saw him at the early days would tell you that, and that's remarkable, because that's not usually how it works. Me, I kept working. I kept working and studying and practicing, and figured it out. And I think over the period of time, figured out also that I probably wasn't going to be Neil Peart or Billy Cobham, or somebody of that ilk, or even Steve Gadd, who my teacher was really enamored with. I kind of figured.
I think most drum teachers are enamored with Steve Gadd.
Say again?
I think most drum teachers are enamored with Steve Gadd.
And at that time, I remember, yeah, I remember a lot of things. My teacher was a knowledgeable, a learned sort of drum person, as far as technique and charts and books and studying. I mean, he knew what he was doing, and he was pumping the theory of a very well respected drum authority in this town. This dude called Chuck Brown. Chuck Brown was I think a teacher and taught some fancy people for Michael Shreve and Bozio, but he also taught my teacher. So my teacher taught his method, you know what I mean? And so I learned, enough of that to sort of be dangerous, but I also knew I wasn't going to go in that direction. also, you know what I mean? But he was really into this one album that was a Chick Corea album called The Mad Hatter, I think.
Yeah.
And he was just flipped out about that. And I mean, it's fancy dreaming, but that's not what sort of really got me excited. Because I was the kid with the long hair, and at that time, that's before punk rock hit, in earnest. But at that time, for me, it was about Sabbath and Zeppelin, and all that kind of the heavier stuff, the darker stuff. So I knew I wasn't gonna, kind of gonna morph overnight into a chicory or something like that. But I still learned. I don't know how the hell did we get on this topic anyway.
It's
I
a
should
good topic.
questions. My point is that Cliff came out fully formed. He was excellent. He was polished. He was poised. He knew what the hell he was doing immediately. He really, truly did. And maybe that came from within. Maybe it came from him studying, with the teacher he studied with, who I think deserves to have his name said, because his father always asked me to always remember this guy and always, tell people about him because he deserves credit. And it's a guy called Steve Doherty. And now with Ray gone, I think it's even more important that I, respect his wishes and speak those things that were important to them. But, Steve taught Cliff a lot, but Cliff also studied Bach, and he was playing that shit early. I mean, he learned how to play by playing a lot of fugues and different Bach things. So, I mean, he was really together. I wasn't, I just kept working.
Did you love it right away?
I did. Absolutely. I without any doubt, I wouldn't probably even be here at all, let alone in the state that I'm in, which is reasonably together. I wouldn't be here probably at all without that fact that I started playing drums at the age of 12 or 13 or whatever it was.
Why would you say that you were unfocused before that?
I really didn't care. I really didn't see a future. I really didn't particularly see myself around after 21 for some reason. It was always one of those kind of weird images I had in my head. It was like I wasn't going to make 21. And I just started playing, and yeah, I just played a lot. Played as much as I could. Had a little pad set, stupid those little original Remo pads, with
Yes.
the gray ones, with
That
the
you
little
could
foam.
tune with a quarter or a nickel or something?
Say again?
You could tune it with like a penny
Yeah,
or
with the screws. With the screws, exactly. And I had a pad set, and I just played. And I played really bad, all the time.
Did you feel like you were really bad at the time, or is that in retrospect?
Oh, yeah. No, I was just trying to learn, trying to figure it out, Absolutely. I knew I didn't know what I was doing. And that was fine, I mean, I get this teacher who's, ripping off of these crazy licks, from these Steve Gadd things and this and that, in drum lesson, and showing me this crazy ass stuff. And it's like, believe me, I knew I wasn't there. I mean, I spent, as a kid, a left-handed kid, very kind of scrawny, very small, kind of just, kind of weak arms and whatever. I spent like years just trying to get my right hand to cooperate, to where I on a match grip, so it's not a traditional grip, but a match grip where they're both the same, going wrist down, kind of, the hinge. And I would just spend years trying to get the stick to bounce back so I could gather it correctly with my fingers, with my little finger and the finger next to it, to get the strength in my hand just to control, the recoil of the stick. I mean, I was, scrawny kid, man. And, but I worked on it, and I never stopped. I kept going, and I kept doing it. And I got stronger. But yeah, I didn't have any illusions for sure. No, definitely not. I mean, the drummers I was listening to at that time were guys like Ian Pace, who was just incredible, especially in that era. And, Cozy Powell, Bill Ward, I mean, I wasn't, I was just a kid, but I loved that music, and I never stopped. I never gave up, and I kept working. And so did I love it immediately? Yeah, absolutely. It gave me something to do. that I like doing, and I think it saved my life. I mean, honestly, I really do. So, where I come from in the East Bay, there's a lot of dudes that were kind of dead enders, and high school was it. And after that, it was, go to get a job and, end up in trouble or whatever. I mean, there's no guarantees out there, So, yeah, I worked a lot. I worked hard. I sometimes I would play for 5 hours a day, and
Would you
badly.
dream about being on
No,
stage like
never.
with Ozzy?
No, oh no, never. It's funny. People always ask that. No, I don't have dreams like that. I don't dream like that at all. I'm a step and next step guy. I'm
Hmm.
always, I never want to look. And the thing too for me is like I've really, I don't like doing interviews and I don't like talking about a lot of stuff because historically, I just feel like if I'm busy looking backwards, I'm always going to trip over what's immediate. And if I'm looking too far forwards, I'm always going to just trip over myself, missing what's immediate. So yeah, no, never, ever. I mean, I played with Cliff. Cliff and I had a good time. We were good friends. We loved music. I mean, insatiably music. And as that started coming into me being a player, a drummer, or trying to be a drummer, all this other music kind of opened up. It wasn't just metal in any way. And I remember the first thing I ever played to was this phenomenal, wonderful, tasteful drummer called Paul Thompson. And Paul played in a band called Roxy Music. And the song was it's a song called Mother of Pearl. It's kind of a mellow song
I
and a
love
nice
that
song.
song.
Oh my God, right? It's just tasteful. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, that's not metal, and then after that it was immediate. I mean, it's like the floodgates open. It's like, well, Sparks aren't metal, and ZZ Top's not metal, and certainly Skynyrd wasn't metal, or so there was, all of a sudden it became a whole world. And then it's like, then I almost kind of felt like I was free, because I wasn't, you know I wasn't going to be Ian Pace. I knew that. I wasn't going to be Neil Peart, Cozy Powell, or even Carl Palmer, these fancier dudes from the era, and I knew I wasn't going to be that. So all of a sudden I hear, a guy like Frank Beard who plays in ZZ Top, and I remember reading an interview with him years ago. I mean, I was probably a 13-year-old kid, and he's all, I know 3 beats, you know,
Yeah.
and I figured out which he said, and I never forget it. It's like, it's weird things like that with me. I don't forget. He said, I know the shuffle, I know the cut shuffle, and I know the monkey beat. And I don't even know what the hell the monkey beat is.
I don't
But the
know.
point is,
Well, to be honest, maybe I'll ask tomorrow because Billy Gibbons is coming on the show tomorrow. So I'll ask
oh
him what the
shit, well
fucking
that's
monkey
funny.
beat
That's
is.
funny timing. Yeah, no, I never forget it. He said, I know 3 beats. And the monkey beat. I kind of think I know what the monkey beat is. There's a song called "Snappy Khaki" off of maybe Tejas, I think, where it's almost like a paradiddle split between the kick, hat, and
Hmm.
snare. I
Hmm.
kind of think that's what the monkey beat is. That's my guess, but I don't know. Yeah, you might find out. But my point is, and then this is the thing that kind of, my point is I'm leading to the Big Bang for me, the real Big Bang, and the real Big Bang was punk rock, because all of
Hmm.
a sudden then I knew I don't have to, be the fanciest or the schmanciest or the most technical person, because that wasn't me. And all of a sudden you everybody can do it, anybody can do it. And that's the thing that really sort of set the fire for me big time, knowing you just got to jump out there and do it. Let your personality come through, let your fingerprint, show itself, rather than, playing in a cover band and doing, Rush covers and Mahavishnu Orchestra covers and, Emerson Lake and Palmer covers, or, whatever. Be yourself,
Hmm. That's all you can
Um,
do.
well, it's very simple, but I think if you're a kid, you maybe don't have the confidence or the wisdom from experience, the perspective to be able to just say, yeah, that is enough.
Yeah.
But it's everything. I mean, it's what It's, I think, what anybody strives for is to be themselves and really express themselves. But, it's all part of the learning process.
Yeah.
It's all part of learning and not even just drums, like you said before, drums are life. Yes, they are. But, your life also impacts your drums, and vice versa. They feed each other. So if you're some rotten kid with a face full of pimples, and no girlfriend, you maybe don't feel as confident. You say, well, yeah, I'm just going to be me and it's going to be cool. You think, well, look at Peter Frampton. He's very pretty, and all the girls I like him. So shit, I better be like him. And,
I better get a voice box.
I mean, wear satin pants and have feathery hair. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's just, when you're a kid, it's different. When you're a kid, it's, I think it's built in insecurity. It's built in finding yourself. And, drums did that for me. They really did. I mean, personally, I learned a lot. You could say I kind of learned everything. And that was even before I went on tour, and that's a whole nother world. Once you go on tour and actually tour music and go out and perform and meet
strangers.
people.
Yeah.
That's a whole different thing. And that, my God, you talk about the education, you couldn't buy that education. I mean, but even before that, just learning how to be a teammate, learning how to hopefully keep your mouth shut enough and not be an asshole all the time is a smart-mouthed, 15-year-old kid that doesn't know any better. It's there for you if you sort of take advantage or aware of it, and you can learn from it. But for me, punk rock was the big bang. For me, that's really what it is. You've asked me 2 questions, I think, this whole time, so I think it's time for you to take control again.
No, you're doing great. Were you going to punk shows in the Bay Area? Like, did you go see Dead Kennedys and bands like that when they were first emerging?
Oh, hell yes. But, I mean, the big one to me, it's like, here's the thing. I mean, it's not like, there was overlap, you know what I mean? It wasn't just like you go from listening to UFO, and Priest, who were kind of, to me, the bands I think that were coming out later, the later sort of third wave of metal, Cream and Hendrix being the first, Zeppelin and Sabbath being the second, and then the later ones, Priest and UFO and Robert Trower, I don't know, you figure it out, all that kind of stuff. You kind of just don't go from that to the other thing and having, safety pins in your cheeks. There was overlap, there was a time in there was an overlap between, I think, say 1976 and into 1977, where it was like both of those things were happening. And the thing that I think deserves credit for it is the Ramones, first of all, because I think that they started in earlier than a lot of the other bands, and they went across to England and did a tour and inspired a lot of bands to form bands, and that I think that deserves recognition. But the big thing for me was, again, it's like, we can all hear the music and that's fine, but seeing it, seeing these bands perform and seeing the Ramones early on the first album coming to San Francisco, that was a big deal for me. But the biggest one of those, it was January, and it was 78. So it was kind of like the end of the beginning, if you will, of punk rock, and that was when the Sex Pistols played Winterland. That was a big deal, and Cliff and I both went to that. And that, from right there, I knew I'd never go back, to see it in the flesh, to see what they were doing, to see, how strong Steve Jones was, and Paul Cook behind him on drums, and then to see that, I knew I was never going back, ever. And I don't know if it's the right thing to say. You might want to cut it out or whatever, but it's like, I just like saying it because I think it's funny. So I say a lot of times, it's like, seeing the Sex Pistols made me realize that I didn't have to listen to Ted Nugent anymore, and I, not to say anything bad about Ted Nugent, but my point is punk rock to me was the big bang. Punk rock changed everything because I knew I could go and do it. And so you're this kid with this long hair, right? And you got horrible, rotten afro, super long hair. And And all of a sudden, this whole different thing is happening. And it's like, what do you do? And it's like, almost as like if it was sort of given to me, from the heavens. It's like, then I heard Motorhead. And I realized what it was about.
The bridge.
Dude, right there. That's it. That is the bridge. There were bridges going both ways. There was bridges, I think, going from metal to punk, and I think there was bridges coming from punk to metal. And Motorhead and the Misfits. In short order, both of those bands made me realize, yeah, man, I got a place here. This is what it's about. Because it's like, I mean, those first 4 or 5 Motorhead albums, I mean, every single one of them. You look at them from the first one was just Motorhead. The second one, I believe, was Overkill. The third one, I believe, was Bomber. And the fourth one was Ace of Spades. And it's like, boom. Every single one, you're redefining the universe. You're reestablishing sort of what's possible. And from there, goddamn, I mean, anything's possible. Everything's possible. And my point is that I didn't feel like I had to give up my love for power, because clearly what Sabbath, and in their louder moments, Zeppelin and a lot of those bands represented to me was just brute force, power, in a way that you could never get to me. You could never get in like a Chick Corea album, So all of a sudden I realized I didn't have to give that up, And then you hear a band like the Stranglers, who were really, really big for me too. And it's like, yeah, it's right there. It's like heavy metal without the guitar solos almost, I mean.
And they can write a great ballad every once in a while.
Oh, it's gorgeous, It's gorgeous. And then that was the other thing too about punk rock is like, yeah, you've got bands that are doing incredible pop music, whether it's, XTC or the Buzzcocks or, stuff like that. I mean, it's all there. So I think once you acknowledge the taste of something else besides metal, it opens the world for you. And you don't have to turn your back on metal, but it's just not 100% all exclusive metal.
Right.
So,
and I think one thing that comes up on this show a lot is how much more tribal music used to be before the streaming era. It seemed like it was much more of a signifier of who you were as a person.
It is, no question. In high school, the T-shirt that you wore or the bands that you listened to, it determined where you hung out in the quad, in the open air area where people all kind of congregated, and certain people hung on the steps or certain people hung on the benches, and the stoners went back behind the gym, and yeah, no, absolutely, and you definitely did. But I'll tell you this though, to sort of contradict that, the town that I went to elementary school and middle school and high school, and the town that Cliff grew up in as well, where we grew up with each other, was everybody liked music, man. It was like nobody didn't like something, whether it was, Marshall Tucker or ZZ Top and Skynyrd, because it was kind of there were farms, in the outskirts of our town, or there were people that liked Ohio Players, in Parliament, and soul music like that. Everybody liked something. The girls like Peter Frampton, we like Sabbath. I mean, they weren't the popular choice in that era, They scared people, I think, or people didn't gravitate towards them. But for me, as soon as I heard that, as soon as I saw that, that's what it was. I was looking for as much power and as much, force as I could find. And to hear Geezer, under Tony, and Ozzy kind of wailing over the top of everything, Ozzy, he has that unbelievable, that blues wail. It's kind of bluesy, but it's also kind of like like a scream or a shriek, it just grabbed me, it really did. It did something to me. And that wasn't always the popular choice, I would say, to say the least.
So you graduated high school in 81?
80, yeah.
And what did you do next?
I went on to college, and all the time was at that point, 80. So 80, Yeah, it's still kind of new wave, I think, at that point, wasn't it?
Well, that's when I was born.
And
But
yeah, it's funny. I saw in the thing too that you said that you're from Milwaukee. I have half of my family is from Milwaukee.
is that right?
Yeah, my grandfather was the editor of the Sentinel. Was it the Milwaukee
Yes, that was the
Sentinel?
morning paper.
Yeah, my grandfather was the editor that they gave him a really one of those fancy Atmos clocks, with the with
Wow.
the with the wheel, and it's for his retirement from there. And actually, I have that downstairs.
Oh my gosh. Can you send a picture of that to me?
Oh yeah, it says from your friends at the Milwaukee Sentinel or whatever it is. Yeah, I'd be happy
When did
to.
he retire?
Yeesh, I don't know. I don't know, but he was. Yeah, we have a lot. We had a lot of family in Milwaukee.
Did you
Yeah,
spend time there in the summers or anything?
not so much. I spent more time in L.A. with the other side of the family, and that was where I had my little apocryphal Black Sabbath moment, watching TV at my grandma's house. But yeah, we did go. I mean, I remember stuff like that super cool restaurant, Carl Resch, I think it was.
Carl Rosh's, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that. Going there with the family dinner. You got to dress up nice and everything's so But yeah, we had family there, a lot of family there too, and that's where I think my mom was actually born there.
And Karl Rosch it's still around to my knowledge, and it's a traditional German restaurant
Yeah, totally.
in downtown Milwaukee, and that would have made sense because it's located near where the Milwaukee Sentinel was headquartered. And
That's
then in
funny.
about 1991 or something, the two newspapers in Milwaukee, the Journal and the Sentinel, merged.
Oh wow.
And so
Yeah.
your grandfather must have retired probably sometime in the 80s then.
No, it was earlier than
Oh,
that.
earlier than
Because
that. Okay.
yeah, because he dude, I think he died in I want to say 69, but it could have been later.
Okay.
He was an Eastern European full through and through, and smoked a lot and drank a lot and got heart disease and stroke and all that. That's the real occupational hazard for being Eastern European. That kind of shit, especially in that era, where it was
And a
undiagnosed.
journalist. I mean, I remember going to the Milwaukee Sentinel on a field
Oh
trip
wow,
in grade
wow.
school, and everybody in the newsroom was smoking and drinking
Yeah,
coffee.
yeah, totally, totally. No, I mean, that's the thing, right? That's just what happened. I mean, I'll tell you another thing, and it's a totally a tangent, and it may not be appropriate for your podcast or whatever. But my grandfather was, I guess, in his era, one of the few people that wasn't caught up in, I think they called it war fever or whatever, where he was actually fair to the Japanese government during the war. And when the signing of the surrender, that's what I'm looking for, when the surrender was happening with Emperor Hirohito on some American battleship, and MacArthur was there, and it was a big deal. It was a huge deal to end the war. The Japanese government specifically requested that my grandfather go there as a correspondent to cover it, because they thought that he was kind of a reasonable person and was fair-minded. And so I have this crazy book that the U.S. military made of him being included on that trip, of him going to all these different functions and events, and kind of culminating with him on the boat taking notes and having his little journalism tape recorder thing, while MacArthur's standing there with his pipe and Hirohito is they're at the table signing, and it's kind of a cool thing.
Was your grandfather's name Bordin as well?
No, he was James Joseph Packman.
Okay, I'm going to have to do some research on him. Because actually, my grandmother was a journalist in Milwaukee, too. And
In that era?
And I also know, my girlfriend is also from Milwaukee, and her grandfather was the dean of the journalism school at Marquette University. So he probably knew your grandfather.
Well, again, he was. I would guess he was probably in the ground by 1970. But if they were around in that time, yeah, he was the editor. I mean,
I'm looking him up right now. He died in '69.
Oh, is that what it was? Like I was guessing, but yeah, that's kind of what I thought.
And he worked at the L.A. Examiner before that in the 20s and through the 40s.
Good Lord. And I see, I do know once he left Milwaukee, they came, that's when the whole thing shifted. And they came west, and he was the editor of a thing called the San Francisco Call Bulletin, also, which is another paper that was, absorbed up, years ago. But he was, I mean, yeah, no, he was a lifetime newspaper man. I remember
That's so interesting.
he used to always bring us these pencils, these big, giant ebony, they're called ebony grease pencils, black, super greasy black pencil. I think they were like what he did his copy changing things in or something as the editor. You read the other people's things. But yeah, he was cool. I liked him, but he died. He's dead.
As we all will. Yeah, it's interesting that he managed to be fair, even though he was a Jewish guy and the Nazis and Japanese were obviously allies.
He was fair, but he lost so many people in Poland in the camps. So I think that he was always, that stuff like that was probably never too far from his mind. It's just you got to be fair and you got to be right. And he was a righteous dude. I mean, he didn't say a lot. He was old school. But yeah. So yeah, that was my grandfather. That's funny. You could look him up that quick. I guess
Well,
it's
I'm
all
sitting
out
in
there.
front of a computer. But
Yeah, it's all
were
out there.
you raised
Yeah.
Jewish?
Yes and no. Very, 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 very. Not really. No, I would say no. We didn't have that in our household. We had some issues that came along when I was pretty young, and then my mom died, and the whole thing kind of scattered. You know what I mean? The whole thing at that point. Up until then, yeah, maybe. Nominally, nothing heavy, nothing serious, but I knew what the holidays were and all that stuff. But we always had Christmas, no matter what, because we were American. But after that, yeah, no, it all kind of changed, and it was kind of almost like every man for himself in the household, and that's sort of where I didn't really touch on too much, but as the growing up, and then all of a sudden for me, that's kind of right when I sort of found Uncle Ozzy, and I found, Hendrix, and I found stuff like that, and it spoke to me so much. And even Rolling Stones. I mean, I remember '72 was Exile on Main Street, and that was big for me. I loved that album, and I had it when it came out. So that was kind of the era where things really it could have gone really bad for me, and I kind of, in a way, feel like listening to those records and sort of, especially Sabbath. Was kind of like a lifeline for me, and it just sort of didn't make me feel so like alone and hopeless, you know, because you hear Ozzy singing about shit that's like it's not real cheerful, and it's like things are kind of doomy and things are kind of dark, and the music is incredibly dark and doomy and powerful, but in some way it also became kind of like you didn't feel alone and you didn't feel isolated, and you kind of almost in that way kind of almost felt uplifted by it, and that's definitely the way what I took from it.
Yeah, and from my brief discussion with Bill Ward, it seems like they were coming from a difficult place as well, and it was a lifeline for them to create that music.
No question. All of those, that whole generation, that whole era of people, and yeah, absolutely.
Post-war kids, in England.
Work in the Lucas Electric factory making really shitty, electric stuff for MGs and Jaguars, that, I mean, you always hear people joke about, those English cars of that era. The electric stuff is so bad. Well, they made it in Birmingham at the Lucas factory, and what did Ozzy say? He worked in a slaughterhouse and then he was a petty thief. I mean, what choices do you have, And I know in spending time, with him, obviously 15 years, proudly with him on tour, and, studio, whatever, but, being in his band for 15 years, there were people around him that have the same story. It's like this one wonderful guy who was our tour manager until he died. He died on tour. He joined the crew from Nazareth, and he came out of Scotland with Nazareth, and he said, I went to work in the coal mines as a 17-year-old kid, and it lasted 2 weeks, and I knew I had to get the hell out of there. So he started working for Nazareth, and Nazareth toured the world, and lo and behold, he ended up working for Ozzy. So, I think that there's a lot of that, where this is the only way out, or you don't have any other, choices or hope or whatever. So it's a powerful thing. Music is a
But
powerful thing.
coming back to you,
Oh,
this tangent started because you were
I'm
talking
happy
about how you
talking
went
about
on to
Bob.
school after high school. What were
Yeah,
you
yeah.
studying?
English. Oh, that was the thing. So yeah, studying, and I just was, state college, studying English, and I kept telling my parents, because my dad was professional. He was a doctor, and I kept telling him, look, I'm gonna keep playing music, and I'm gonna keep playing music, and if something happens, that's what I'm doing, and if it doesn't happen, I'll figure something else out. I'll, get some skill or training or something. And it was really, I never ever was ever planning on doing that second part. It was never that. It was just always more like just holding it off, as
Hmm.
long as I could. And it was up to me to sort of figure out what the hell I was going to do and make something happen that I wanted to do.
Did you believe in yourself at that point? Like, did you think it was going to happen?
I just knew that that's what I was going to do. I knew
Hmm.
that there wasn't any choice. I knew I was like I said, the second option there, going back to school and getting some kind of skill or figuring out, I knew that wasn't an option. Even though I told them that for years, I knew it wasn't an option. So, but I never really connected that with, I'm so great it's going to happen, that kind of shit. No, hell no. No, never. It was more like the opportunity of, I'm going to keep working and I'm going to keep learning and I'm going to figure something out, and just keep sort of doing it. I'm just going to keep doing it because I need to do it. It's like at that point, when I can say I was raised on, the music of my parents, which was, classical music, and I got drugged to the opera, it all kind of fell into place. I realized, I like Wagner,
Hmm.
I like Beethoven, I like music that tends towards the more dramatic, the more powerful. And I realized that I've been gravitating towards that my whole life. You know what I mean? Not just a Sabbath or a Zeppelin record, but the stuff even before that. So I knew I was looking to do something aggressive. I knew I was looking to express myself in a way to get out as much power as I possibly could. And another really big thing for me that put me on the path to sort of figuring out, what I could do or what I could be or where I wanted to go was Killing Joke. The drummer for Killing Joke, is a monster, and he expressed power in ways that nobody really did at that time. And so that, you add Paul Ferguson into the mix with Tony Williams and Bill Ward, and even Paul Thompson, you know, you got something. That's an explosive mix, um, and it's not a mix that it's become something, that's unique. If you are truly the sum of your influences, if you shit what you eat, which I really truly believe you do musically, um, be careful what you put into that, to that bowl. Be careful what you consume. Um, so, it just sort of, I don't know, it just sort of evolved, like things will. It just evolved. Into college, then I ended up studying with this dude from Ghana, and that was kind of really the final piece for me because at that point, I'm listening to lots of different creative drummers, like the drummer for Echo and the Bunnymen at the time,
Oh, great.
who's dead. He was brilliant. Pete DeFreitas, I think his name was.
Hmm.
Just a brilliant drummer. Brilliant. Unbelievable. Totally creative. Nobody like him. The drummer for Gang of Four at that time, Hugo.
Hmm.
Hugo was wonderful. Great drummer. Budgie, the guy that played in Susie and the
Yeah,
Banshees, was
Budgie was just over
fabulous.
here a couple of weeks ago.
I mean, what a brilliant player,
What a
right?
he's and that first Slits record that he did is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I mean, so you get the idea. I mean, all of a sudden, it's like you sort of switch radio stations from fucking Wang Dang Sweet Poon Tang, and all of a sudden you've changed it to another radio station, and you're hearing that everything else. and that was a fertile world, man, because anything was possible. Everything was possible. That's you can't overstress that. I mean, everything was possible musically. I mean, fuck. Just do something. So adding all of that to the fact that I was now starting to learn the percussive philosophies of this dude from Ghana who couldn't play a drum set to save his life, but could play any number of different percussion instruments and tap his feet and sing and clap his hands or click his mouth. And, he's the guy is a walking polyrhythm, this guy. And all of a sudden it got me off of the sort of traditional kick, snare, hat, play the drums like you do, and you're going to have 4 counts at a certain point to do something interesting, so don't blow it, and then go back to playing the kick, snare, hat, and just marking time and staying out of the way. I didn't want to do that anyway, and listening to guys like Budgie or Paul Thompson or Paul Ferguson, and then seeing this dude from Ghana who, is playing drums as patterns, and is playing drums as interlocking, rhythmic syncopations. That's what really kind of made it. That's what I kind of took off with. That's when it started, becoming me.
Like finding your voice.
Was exciting. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think, yeah, as I said before, it's like that's the beauty of music or art or painting or writing or whatever. If you can express yourself, if you can find your voice and really express yourself, there's no satisfaction like that satisfaction. And yeah, I do. I think that's when I started scratching the itch that I had, because I never, really left, Bill Ward, and if you know about him, there's a thing I think that's super important, and it sounds kind of stupid, but if you look at Volume 4, the album Volume 4, the center, it's an opening, it's a gatefold, and if you open it up, there's portraits of each of the band members there, and if you look at the portrait of Bill, that's what it's about for me. It's about a dude that's completely in a trance. His passions and his heart and his balls have carried him somewhere where he doesn't even know where the hell he is. His eyes are closed, he's covered in sweat, and both of his sticks are butt end sticks, big giant ass butt end sticks, and they're both up above his head, ready to come down. And to me, that's what a flam sounds like. And people say, oh, you do these flams, and that was interesting at that time. There's an album on there, a song called Supernaut that he did, and it's only one. There's only one. But it's like, I wanted that power. I wanted that power for everything. That's where I wanted to live. I didn't want to just sort of visit there once in a while, once a song before the solo and, after the second chorus, and you have 4 counts to do something. I wanted to live there the whole time, Does that make sense? You understand what I'm saying?
I hear that in your playing for sure.
There's a thing that David Lee Roth said, and I'm not a huge Roth guy, because again, to me, I grew up on Sabbath and Zeppelin, so when Van Halen were kicking Sabbath's ass on tour, in 77, 78, I'd seen the Sex Pistols, so I was kind of gone. I listened to Motorhead then, but Roth said something that was totally on point. He was trying to describe, one of his solo things that I think never came out, but he said, you know that part in the Who movie, the kids are all right, that part, it won't get fooled again, after the breakdown, and Roger Daltrey does that giant scream, that, and you see the footage, it's the climax of the whole thing, and Pete Townshend runs across the stage and slides on his knees, and it's like, that's the moment where like everything is firing right there, it's like that's the moment that you're the most erect, in your mind, in your body, everything, and it's like, and Ross said, well, my album's going to be like that knee slide the whole time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's like Pantera. It's like Pantera loved Van Halen, and it's like they wanted to take it further, and Sabbath, you hear about Geezer talking about being influenced by Jack Bruce, and it's like, no disrespect to Jack Bruce because he's brilliant, but Geezer took it further, Geezer, that crazy syncopated, riffing bass style, He also, the dude from Humble Pie, I think also was really great at that. But it's like, isn't that the generation's job? Isn't it? Wasn't it the job of Ferdinand Porsche to, blow away Henry Ford's Model A with his fucking Turbo Carrera? I mean, isn't it our job as people that are influenced by something to try to take it further or do something with it, from the generation previous? And that's what it was for me. When I studied with that Ghanaian dude, I realized you got to remember too, as a left-handed drummer, as a natural lefty playing on a mostly right-handed kit, I wasn't tied to, cross your hand over and keep time, like Ringo Starr. No disrespect to Ringo in any way, but I wasn't tied to that. I didn't need that, so that's the thing. That's what
Although
it was.
Ringo's a lefty on a right-handed kit, isn't he?
Well, I mean, so that's the best thing I could say, is because then no disrespect to him whatsoever, but that's funny. So he plays right-handed because he crosses his hands. Mm-hmm. That's all I'm saying. And that was the thing that my drum teacher back in the day, if you go back to the learning, as a 12-year-old, the drummer, he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, and I brought him Volume 4, and I showed him that picture of Bill, and I said, "This is what I'm into." And he said, "Well, you're never going to do that, as a lefty, sort of playing the, you turn your hi-hat around, I guess, like Ian Pace. I think didn't he flip his hi-hat? I think he did.
I don't know.
There's lefty drummers, that they flip the whole thing, and that's just how it goes." And he said, "You're never going to get that way. So let's go for broke." It's like, if you're into doing something different, if you're into, taking a chance, so to speak, I'm willing to experiment. That's what he said. "I'm going to teach you how to play the right way, but I'm going to let you play your way."
Anyway, you will never understand it, cause it happens too fast. And it feels so good, it's like walking on glass. It's so cool, it's so hip, it's alright. It's so groovy, it's out of sight. You can touch it, smell it, taste it so sweet. But it makes no difference, cause it knocks you off your feet. You want it all, but you can't have it. Crying, bleeding, lying on the floor, so you lay down on it and you do it some more.
I've heard so many people on this show tell me about bringing in something that they like to their music lessons, only to have the person who's supposed to be teaching them disparaging them for liking something.
Oh yeah. Well, don't get me wrong. He looked it down his nose as that shit, like anybody. But he also said, if you want to try to, hit your sticks on the back of your ears, rather than hit your stick on the bottom of your wrist, because you're crossed over, I'm willing to try. And it also it fed into the match grip. You certainly can't do that with a standard grip, stirring the soup. You can't do that. There's that. But he also said another thing that was I think a great service. He said, "Look, I'm willing to try that if you're willing to, like I said, take a chance." And I didn't know, of course, great. But he also said, "Go and buy this record and come back next week and tell me if you're interested, because this, he said, this is, it's heavy, it's loud, it's aggressive, but it's quality. It's worth it." And the record was Tony Williams' Lifetime, believe it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
And Tony might have been was he living in Marin at that time?
The irony is my cousin worked for him.
What?
My cousin was his business manager. Yeah.
Man, you have some family. You have the editor of the Milwaukee Sentinel, Tony Williams, business manager. So did you get to hang out with Tony?
I did.
Oh my gosh.
I did. That's a whole nother set of stories, man. But so he said, "Go buy Tony's, go buy Believe It." And, let's just talk. And you talked to Matt Cameron. I've talked with, Matt and I go back a long way. I don't know if you know that or not, but I mean, I knew
Actually,
Soundgarden
when
before he
Matt was
played.
playing here with me in the fall, you were in town too, and the folks at Yamaha were helping tech for Matt and you that day.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, I was probably tracking. I think I was tracking for Joe and Robert these wonderful odd time signature, just crazy songs. But Matt and I, we go back a long way. I mean, like I said, I knew Soundgarden when Matt was not in the band. I knew the other guy, who was in the band. So I mean, we go back to the beginning, he and I, and we're also born less than 24 hours apart. I'm a little bit older than he is. He's the 28th. I'm the 27th, and same year, all that. But we talked about that album a lot, and it's like yeah. And to me, I even talked to Plant about that when we toured with him. To me, that's really the missing link right there between, the jazz tradition, and you've got wonderful drummers like Blakey and Elvin Jones and all of that. But then there's Tony. And Tony,
and also
he turned his sticks backwards, and he broke his cymbals, and those closed flam press rolls that he would do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you want to talk about brute fucking force?
His arms were giant at the time too.
Oh, dude, just a beast, a beast. Oh my God! I mean, the first the first side one of that album,
the song "Snake Oil." You know what I'm talking?
Oh my God!
I spent weeks trying to figure out what he was doing on that.
Oh my God! Is that the one? Is that the one that it's got the little mellow little keyboard patch and he's doing this crazy?
It's like it's like kind of a cheesy keyboard patch, and he's just doing crazy stuff.
No, they're all just. You don't use the word tour de force lightly, But I talked to Plant, again, me, the Forrest Gump, in rock, in these interesting, situations in my life, I was able, because Plant was a big fan of my band, and he took us on tour a lot. I was able to sit there and talk with him at length. We toured with him for I think 6-8 weeks. You can look it up, whatever. And it wasn't long after that there was the rumor and the incredible proposition of me going and playing in Zeppelin, which obviously never happened, and that was fine. But to be thought of, was wonderful. But we talked about Tony Williams, and he that's a learned man. That's a man that respects the musical traditions, and is so connected to it.
And he also seems to be so connected with everything that's going on currently too.
He's wonderful. He's a really, truly a prince of a man, in my opinion. I don't know. I didn't know him in 77, or when I saw those shows here, those are the last American shows. I was at those shows too. I didn't know him back then. He didn't make moves on my girlfriend when he was, 27 years old and at the top of the world with Stairway to Heaven, so I've not been in business with him, and I can't say, about him only just from what I've experienced and watching how he treated people and that and the respect and the dignity that he comported himself with and as good as he was to our band. But the point is I was saying to him, we're talking about Bonham, how could you not, and talking about, seeing them, in those two last Oakland shows where they had the real serious problems backstage and this and that, and, going through all that and finally just saying, I kind of feel like Tony Williams is the missing link, between a guy like Bonham and a guy like Elvin Jones, and he's all, he was really, he was totally hip to Tony Williams and that music at that time and agreed that it was, hugely influential,
Yeah, I always had read about how Bonham was really into the swing drummers like Gene Krupa, but I do hear a lot of commonalities between what Elvin was doing and what Bonham was doing.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I think, again, it's like I think even Bill said, the great Mr. Bill Ward said in your thing, is like, that's who they grew up watching. And they took it a step further, Mm-hmm. I mean, Gene Krupa, he took the bandstand and brought the drummer, maybe towards the front and center. But, you could argue Chick Webb did that before him.
Sure.
who was a fucking
And he was Chick Webb was Buddy Rich's number one influence.
he was a giant, and I don't say that lightly because he was, I think, a man of really small stature. He was a fucking giant, Chick Webb. He's doing these cutting contests and he's kicking people's asses with glee. But the point is that I think that, I do think that, Gene Krupa took it maybe a step further, than some of the drummers before him. And I think that certainly, the great John Bonham certainly took it several steps forward, from, what he was, growing up consuming. And I think that's the best tribute, You can be influenced by something, but you can also, consume it to the point where you can spit it out and it's you. Mm-hmm. That's the difference between, innovation and influence and just thievery, right? I mean, how many bands over the years have we heard, try to come out and sound just like Zeppelin and pretend like they're not? Doesn't seem to usually last much, It's not an innovation, it's do something different, Mm-hmm. I mean, I think like a good example is like a guy like John Theodore nowadays. He can do Bonham like nobody's business.
That's right. But he sounds like John.
That's my
John
point.
Theodore.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm saying. So you see what I'm saying, and that's important. I think I think it's important. If you're lucky enough to be able to be moved. And the passion, the fire, whatever you want to call it, is ignited, and you take it on board, and then you're even more lucky enough to be able to express it, and spit it out in your way. Man, I mean, what a gift.
So, was there a time, going back to your conversation with your dad, where you said you were going to go for it and try to be a drummer?
Yeah,
but you would always you'd always be open to getting a real job or going back to school if necessary.
Oh, yeah.
So was there a time when you felt like you had achieved what you wanted to achieve in music? Like was there a time when you could put your dad's concerns to rest?
I mean, it's a simple question. I don't know if that's a simple answer. I never really took the concern that seriously anyway. Mm-hmm. So there's that. So that may be kind of a moot point anyway, but I mean the band got again. It's just not that overnight, It's just it only happens overnight in Hannah, Montana, because you've got 23 minutes, without the commercials to tell the story, and go from here to there. But in real life, it's just not that simple,
And you started the band while you were still in high school, right?
No, we were. I was in college. And I met somebody who knew somebody. I was playing in a band. It was a pop band. A good example. It was a pop band, and I was too undisciplined and too loose and too sweaty and probably way too loud, to play in this band. And the guys and he was a nice guy, and I know him to this day. And he said, "Look, you're not the right drummer for this band. You know it. I know it. Everybody knows it." And I said, "Yeah, you're right." And he said, "You got to go talk to this other dude that I know. He listens to all that weird shit, like you listen to, like XTC and Killing Joke and, all of it." And I'm like, "Great, cool," And so I did. And that's where then I met my bass player, now, because he had answered an ad in a record store to that guy who had listened to all that, quote unquote weird shit, and he was playing with him. I think he played twice with him, so this is all really super kind of, it all happened at the same time.
So this was Billy.
Yeah. And then Bill was the bass player that answered that ad. So then we started playing together. Yeah. And his influence on me and the music that he brought, we intersected in some ways, but we did not intersect in other ways. Metal, no way, not part of his tradition in any way. I mean, he'll tell you, my dad listened to Led Zeppelin, I didn't care about Led Zeppelin, that kind of stuff. And that, so we kind of, I don't know, broadened each other's horizons in some ways, he brought stuff that I wasn't so aware of, like the Misfits and all the kind of a lot of punk rock germs and that's what he grew up with, was real kind of archetypal punk rock, I guess you would call it, and he was really into it. But he also really loved bands like Roxy Music and Sparks, which were bands that I was into from being a kid, So, there was overlap. We found each other. It took a while, but we found each other. I think he was also a really huge Bowie guy, different certain eras of Bowie. So, it took a while. But then I knew I was in the right place. Then I knew there was somebody that, we could speak the same musical language. We could figure out, how to scratch that itch together. And so, yeah, that was a big deal. That was definitely a big deal. And that was kind of still going through college, just kind of marking time, trying to figure it out. And that's what I was waiting for. That's what the wait was about. So, yeah.
Was the band kind of the central part of your life at that point?
Was what?
Was being in the band central to your identity at that point?
Everything.
Yeah.
My wife will tell you, my wife was around at that time, and, she got, I don't want to say short shrift, but, we were together. I'm still with the same, 36 years later, No, it was everything. Absolutely. And if I had to go to work, I went to work, so I could pay studio rent or, buy drum heads, yeah, absolutely. But no, it was everything. And again, it was because if we would have found another band, so to speak, that was sort of doing what we were doing, we probably wouldn't have done it because we were just kind of doing what we felt like needed to be done. It's just like you put all this stuff in the blender, that you like, and it's a fairly unique set of, ingredients. And something unique is bound to come out, if it comes through you, and you add to it, or you put your spin on it, or you're the editor and you select what goes what and where. It's just, and then, yeah, that was the time when I'm studying with that African dude. So, it's kind of all in play, But
right.
yeah, it was,
and then being part of a band, you're then, determining which components you all agree on and what parts of your personality maybe don't enhance the band as much. And then you kind of become an organism unto itself.
Yeah, well, that's the point. And I was coming back from those sessions with this Ghanaian man, CK was his name, and I'm teaching those guys what I've learned. Every couple 3 days a week it was, whatever it was. I think it was 3 days a week, maybe 2, whatever. But I'm going back to those guys directly, saying, this is what this guy just told me, and I've maybe got it a little wrong, or I'm not exactly as spot on as far as technique or information as he was teaching it, but I'm teaching it to them, in my own way that's probably imperfect, as it is, but now all of a sudden it's a thing because I'm sharing it with those guys, So guess what, it may be the wrong language or maybe the wrong usage of the language, but all of a sudden all three of us are learning the same language. And
that's how language works. That's how pidgin language works, and it's how language evolves. It's because, of course, you're not going to be able to play authentically like a Ghanaian person, so you have your own interpretation of it, and then it becomes one step removed when you show it to the other guys in the band.
But that one step, it cements it because I'm teaching it to them as that.
Yeah.
And that's right. So that's the thing is all of a sudden, it's not a continent of people in Ghana that, that speak this musical language. And it's not even a class, in school where that subset of people speak that same language. All of a sudden, it's those three people that are in the room, talking and learning and working and exploring together. It's a subset of three. And that's what it was, and so that kind of stuff is powerful. It's exciting. It's transformative. It's like all of a sudden it's another tool. You throw all these tools in the bag, and you got Black Sabbath, and you've got the Damned and the Sex Pistols and the Germs, and you've got all this Last Poets we were listening to, and lots of dub, lots of Lee Perry influence, and those sound systems. It's a crazy, unique, improbable subset of so many different things. And then you even talk about my keyboard player who comes in.
Roddy.
That was that Lord mercy, that was a whole nother story. I mean, just look at the three of us, and look at the different projects that we've done over our lives. Roddy plays in these kind of light pop bands, and then he's doing some kind of also a really super aggressive industrial kind of downtown New York art scene music. And
I played with him in this weird noise jam over the summer here in LA.
Sure. Right. So, and what did I do? I went and played for Ozzy. What did I do? I'm cutting these outrageous tracks with me and Robert and Joe, that are in 5 different time signatures, and 8-minute songs, and it's like, and I'm super proud of it, but Roddy would never do that. Bill would never do that. Mike Patton? No, hell no, no way. So it's like you said before, it's like, there's different elements to all the different individuals in the band, and some of them overlap and some of them don't, but I guess as you get older, also goes back to what we said earlier, is like, if you get older, hopefully you get more comfortable with that, and you're not so, self-conscious or just trying to fit in, and new to yourself and your individuality just to fit in, but be more sort of comfortable with just being yourself. And that's a process, that's not easy.
I know. I mean, I feel like I've been working on that
your whole life,
decades.
And you will. You'll probably never stop. I mean, I know that's what Bill said, in so many words, in his thing that I heard you talk about. It's true. Very few of us, come out and say, "Oh, that's the greatest thing ever." Oh my God, this is the, it's like, it's always work. It's always, you see the rough edges, I only know of musicians that listen to their own music, willingly. I'll never listen to it willingly.
Well, when your first album, We Care a Lot, came out, were you proud of your playing on it, or did you feel like you could hear the flaws and you weren't so happy with it?
Well, the thing about that album, I'll say it's somewhat in between, in a way. It's, again, because it's just never that simple.
Yeah.
The thing about that album was this. This was the thing about the album. The album was a demo tape of ours. We knew that we'd come to the point where we needed a really good demo to get better shows. We knew we needed a really good demo, if not some sort of vinyl, to regionally tour. I'm talking about go maybe to Portland, Seattle, go to LA, Santa Barbara. We knew that. We knew we needed more. So it was the first step in us. We worked. Until that point, the band had done lots of different shows with different singers. We would write a set of music and have the singer sing, and then we'd have another singer and we'd write a set of music, and that kind of stuff. So at this point, we had a stable lineup. At this point, we had Jim and Chuck, and we knew the lineup was stable. So we had been working at a set of music for a little while and sort of dialing it in and honing it and perfecting it, excuse me. And so we were very prepared. As Matt Wallace said when we went, I think we did the whole damned album in 3 days.
Mixing
and I think
and everything.
I think the mixing was maybe a weekend following, but we cut all the songs in 3 days. I think that's what it was. One weekend we recorded, and then the next weekend we mixed, and it was 2 days recording and 2 days mixing, or 3 days, something like that. But very, very few sessions. It was a super small, short time. And number one is because we didn't have any money. We financed it ourselves, so we didn't have any money to pay for it. So we did the best with what we had. But the point is that we weren't going to waste time. We were prepared. And the thing about that album for me, if you talk about the nuts and bolts of drumming, I don't use hi-hat on that album. I don't think ever, not once, except to stamp my foot on it to mark time when I'm on my toms and doing patterns. The album was mostly patterns. And that in and of itself, as long as I got the pattern right, there weren't a lot of fills to be considered. There weren't a lot of fills to be had in that. What we were trying to do was build, kind of a thick foundation, and not so much worry about the embellishment of the actual structure. To me, that's what that album is. It's really bare bones. It's really stripped down, and it's kind of like the essence of what it was about. Like if you listen to, songs on that album, you could probably, if you closed your eyes and squinted a little bit, you could probably see how we could evolve into something like Epic or Midlife Crisis, or that, because there's elements of that thick kind of pattern that's being played. Not so much of a traditional, like, kick snare hat, verse, chorus, verse, and then there's a fill before the solo. That's not what we were after there. So for me, what I heard when I listened to the tracks was I got the pattern right. Yeah. And it felt steady. It felt solid. And I wasn't real happy with the tone, I think. But, that's a part, you're learning to do that. But as far as the execution of it, yeah, I do think that we got what we were trying to get on that album. But that's why. You see what I'm saying? It's
yes.
It's a little different than I think what you would, normally maybe judge it on. It's hard to say.
I'm curious as to how you arrived at your drum setup, because it's really unique. You use really large drums.
Just a sort of necessity, being the mother of invention. I mean,
yeah.
You're coming from a place where, number one, well, there's a couple different things. If you're starting out and you're playing, kind of shitty punk rock squats or just you throw and go shows, you may have a guitar mic, maybe, to go through the PA. Maybe we have a keyboard player, so that's going to take space right there. But, there's not going to be a lot of sort of sound support. And I always was just kind of playing full force, loudly, to be heard. And that includes my foot, to be heard. And big drums help, big drums make it so. Big drums allow you to be heard. And I guess I should even go back further than that, actually. It's to really talk about it. Cliff and I kind of came up playing in these jams. Cliff was legendary around the Bay Area for playing in these jams. We had a very good friend who had a barn out in the middle of nowhere where we could play absolutely all night at maximum volume. We could play for days, weeks, and not be bothered, And Cliff was kind of the king of the jam. You look at his style, he was fluid, he rolled, and he was always creative and always going somewhere. And that's how I kind of came up playing. So it helps if you've got, sort of substantial equipment to play, with guys like that, because he was a loud player, he played the bass with his fingers really hard, and we had guitar player friends that, had Marshalls and played really hard and loud, and the music we were playing at that time was based on metal and that, so it was aggressive. So, big drums help, big drums help you get heard, big drums give you a sound, that's weighty and substantial. And if I'm going to be left-handed and playing the drums I'm playing, if you're right-handed, you're going to probably go to your floor tom from your right hand. That's your kind of go-to, drum that you're going to be, playing a lot. Like if you look at Bonham, he does a lot of things that are on the snare and the floor tom. Well, me, I'm left-handed. My go-to drum is going to be that first rack tom. That's what I'm hitting with my left hand. So I don't want, a 10 or 11 inch little small drum that goes bing. Right. I want that boom. I want that thunder. So that's also one of the reasons why I had big toms, is because the first tom was the one that I used the most. That's the one that set the whole order of sizes of drums, because that's the one I used the most. You know what I mean? Had I been right-handed, it might have been a 12-inch, a 14-inch, and then an 18-inch floor tom, because my right hand is going to naturally go to that 18-inch floor tom. But for me, with the left hand, I wanted a big drum. I didn't want to hit some little small drum and flesh out the sound in that way. I wanted something big. So that's one reason. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so that's one reason. But then also, if you're going to listen to stuff, that's, I don't know, that's enough. That's enough.
Well, earlier you mentioned that the album, The Real Thing, changed your life. How did it change your life?
Well, Epic was a hit. Epic was, Epic put us on the map with the mainstream audience, and clearly changed my life. I mean, had that album have not been, a success, I mean, that it only took a year and a half or 2 years to be a success. The album, was out. I mean, you talked to Matt Cameron about that. My God, we toured. Both of us were at the bottom of the bill with Voivod, and we just kept touring. We didn't stop. And a year and a half in, it became a hit. But I mean, certainly if it hadn't been a hit, wouldn't have gone the way it went, wouldn't have been where we are, certainly not now. So, I mean, it definitely changed my life. It was good for our career. I mean, in that way. It allowed us, I mean, the funny thing that I think about, not to be kind of flip about it, but the funny thing I think about what that album really did for us is it allowed us to make Angel Dust. It allowed us that one kind of hesitating, the reaction of the record company to say, well, shit, we didn't know what the hell to do with Real Thing in the first place, and it took us 18 months or 16 months to figure it out by watching, other record companies around the world that you were signed to individually and watched how they marketed you. I mean, because the Americans, they only figured out Real Thing was viable once they saw London Records and what they were doing with it. And then they came back home and then they figured it out. But the point is that had we have not had success with Real Thing, we would not have had that little small time off the leash that we had to make Angel Dust. And to me, I'm probably most proudest of, because you can't say, that was a band that was trying to replicate their successful formula from one album to the other. I mean, you could say the exact opposite, I think, and I think you'd be correct. And that's one of the things I think I'm most proud of, is we didn't take the chicken shit way and just do what we felt like, this is going to be successful. Now people expect us to do this, so we're going to just keep doing that.
Right.
And that's bullshit. That's dog shit. And that's probably the best thing about The Real Thing to me, is it allowed us that one shot that we could take, a free shot, sort of unregulated by the labels. And that's what we gave. And I'm proud of that, because I think that it's valid. Look, had we have been scared to replicate We Care a Lot, we never would have even wrote Epic. And have been scared to replicate Epic, we wouldn't have written, something like Midlife or Last Comes Sorrow or, whatever. So it's, I'm proud of that, because it was a good step. And it once they sort of gave us the keys to the candy store, so to speak, after that record was a hit, we didn't, I don't think we took the cowardly way out. I think that we stepped up, and did something individual, creative, certainly passionate. We fought for that. We fought for every note on Angel Dust to be the way it was. And there was lots of, how do you say, resistance, even within the band. We lost a member, after that album, because there was resistance even within the band. But that's what we wanted to do. And I like that. So that's the answer to that question.
Yes, my hand is like lead.
What did it mean to you when you had the opportunity to play with Ozzy, Uncle Ozzy?
Yeah, it felt right. It felt right because it after having done Faith No More and kind of gone around my universe musically, and it was almost kind of like where I started again. It was coming back, you know what I mean, to where I began. And I felt like in large part, I really felt like I was repaying him a debt that he didn't know that I owed him. When we first met, and you got to remember too, in my life, Cliff Burton has loomed very large. It's not a secret. And the same with our old guitar player Jim. We were good friends in our family, and that. And you got to remember that Cliff's last U.S. tour was with Ozzy. It was a huge deal for Metallica to open for Ozzy, and we saw half a dozen shows on that tour. All across the country. We were touring in a van and dragging our equipment around ourselves, and they're on a bus, and they took good care of us. We came and saw them, and they fed us and got us drunk, and so that was a big deal for them to be playing with Ozzy. It was a huge deal for Cliff to meet Ozzy. Was a huge deal. I remember that. So coming in, myself, when I finally met him, we had that history. We had that, and I was explaining to him, the Metallica connection and the connection especially with Cliff, and then I kind of just, this was in LA. It was at that RIP party at the Palladium where we played with Ozzy. Ozzy came and played with us, and he wasn't in the best of shape. He had he had some physical issues and this and that, and he was, I think at that point, he was retired technically, so he was kind of out of the game, and here's this new band coming, they had this big hit song, and we were kind of riding high in that, and we were in the dressing room. I'll never forget it. Palladium, the old Palladium had very small dressing rooms, like kind of like closets, and everybody has noise and Hetfield's around because he played with us that night, and it was just it's LA, it's a big thing. RIP magazine party at the time was a big deal, and Ozzy and I were just kind of sitting in the corner. We happened to be sitting there, and I kind of explained to him, my story, how I grew up, and what Sabbath meant to me, what he meant to me, and I don't think he ever forgot it, So I in that way, I think I kind of did that when I met him. So once he decided to change his band members, and then his office called and said, you want to come and play? And I'm sure. I felt kind of clean, I didn't feel like there was anything more for me to do but just play the music. Mm-hmm. And that to me was a super revelation to me. It was just totally like liberating thing for me to I just went on and I played the songs, If Ozzy was in good shape that night or he wasn't, it didn't matter. I went on and played the songs, and I learned a lot about, delivering, music in that way and presenting music in that way where, play the songs, and with him, the songs were very important to people. Those songs are hugely important in people's lives, and I kind of didn't want to fuck them up, I mean, you get into a band where you've had multiple members playing over the years, the songs can evolve sometimes away from, where they were originally. And so I really wanted to kind of I wanted to play that shit right, just out of respect, and respect for the people, whether it's Daisley and Randy and, that, or Sabbath guys or whoever, or Ozzy himself, what he's given to me. I wanted to play it right. I didn't want to kind of cut corners, and I felt good about that. But no, it's nothing I ever dreamed of. I don't work that way. I never worked that way. It wasn't my fantasy or any of that kind of stuff. No, hell no. Definitely not.
Earlier you mentioned you'd like to just stay in the moment.
I try to.
As possible. So yeah, what's the most important thing to you right now?
Well, health. Right now, the most important thing is health. My children are not with me. They're of age. They're not really children, but they're away. And there's a crazy, the virus going around that's taking people down left and right. And that's a massive concern for everybody, whether you're old or young or what. It's like, touring has stopped, gatherings of people have stopped. I don't have baseball to look forward to, which is a big thing for me.
Are you a Giants guy?
Oh, yeah, of course. And hey, I'll tell you flat out, say it in public. If I had grown up in LA like my grandparents and half my family, I'm sure I'd be a Dodger guy. But I'm from San Francisco and I'm a Giants fan. I don't buy into the marketing so much. I think it's stupid, but I love baseball. Yeah, I do. But that's really on my mind right now. I mean, I can't tell you if all the Faith No More dates that are booked for the rest of the year are going to happen. I'm very skeptical. And that sucks, It sucks for me because I want to play, and it sucks because that's the reality of the situation that we're in, where people are so sick and it's so contagious that we can't have people get together in, groups more than 10, So that's really what's on my mind right now. This is uncharted territory. This is no place that we've ever been, before. So, that's really on my mind. I don't know if that was really what you meant.
Yeah, I meant to ask you what's on your mind.
Yeah, so it's hard not to. I guarantee you, your plans, your immediate future has been upended.
Yeah,
I mean, there's no questions. Everybody, So
again, I just feel so lucky that I have a place to live and that I'm healthy and that the people that I love are healthy right now. I mean, I really feel that on a visceral level, the gratitude.
Amen. I mean, that's the thing. And you it's the small victories, right? The simple things. So.
And also, I feel so grateful to have this opportunity to talk to you, Mike. I mean, in a similar way to how Ozzy's music affected you, your music affected me when I was just starting to turn to music as part of my identity. And I'm really grateful for that. And it's
thank you for listening.
It's been a big part of my life.
I appreciate that. I mean, and hopefully it gave you the sort of the okay to go ahead and do whatever the hell you wanted to do, because that's all we did, is we just kind of shut everything else out when we played music and just kind of did what we wanted to do. It's, in some ways, I think it's kind of a miracle that this band has had longevity or commercial success in any way, because it was truly not a commercial impulse that started this band. And that's a quote I have to give to my bass player, and he's right on point. It's like, we did this because we had an itch we wanted to scratch, and it wasn't getting scratched anywhere else. We certainly didn't do this to get signed or, be popular or meet people or make money. We scratched an itch that we wanted to scratch because it wasn't being scratched otherwise. So I hope that, I hope that encourages other people to do the same thing, because you'll never know what you're going to come up with.
Yeah, I mean, the more folks like yourself that I speak to, the more common it seems that people that set out with the intention of just, expressing a unique idea are more likely to happen upon, financial or popular success than people that are setting out to achieve popular success. Because that's what resonates with people is when you offer something, different, unique to yourself and pure.
But it's hard to get heard. That's the
and it was you were together for almost 10 years before there was any kind of mainstream success.
That's what I'm saying. And certainly in that time we were figuring it out and getting better, hopefully, at what we did also. You gotta think that it's not just one thing working at the same time. It's, what I mean? It's like lots of different things working. You play a lot of shows and you sort of learn your craft, or you learn what works, it doesn't work. Your interests maybe change, your experience is broader, by traveling and also then, also moving is popular taste too. So, it's lots of different things moving at the same time. You know what I mean? It's never just one dimensional. But I mean, I don't know. It's just Seemed like a good idea at the time. I mean, we just kind of, like I said, we tried to make ourselves happy. We figured if we made ourselves happy, maybe there'd be some other people that it might, resonate with also. I don't know.
Before I let you go, is there a Tony Williams story that comes to mind that you'd like to tell?
I just, I just kind of, whenever I think about him now, I think about two things. One is not a particular firsthand story, but it's the quote in the reissue of Williams' lifetime, and I think it's also got another album on there that's a little more commercial. But it's a quote from Miles, and Miles said, sort of not verbatim, but the gist is, I was at a time in my career where I felt like I knew everything and I had done everything that was possible to be done. And so I stopped practicing. And then this 16-year-old kid comes along, and he said, and this is the quote from Ozzy, he just blew my mind. He was so motherfucking bad. He blew my mind and kicked my ass into making me go and rehearse again. That's the thing. When I think about Tony Williams, I think about a guy that can do that, get Miles off his ass. But the thing about Tony that I remember most was going with him to a clinic that he did, and he's hanging around. He's in his little BMW that he was driving around. He had this kind of BMW sedan I think he loved, and smoking a cigar, and he's dressed up real nice, and he got some loafers with no socks on, kind of just look good and nice, and he walks into this arena, this little auditorium, and there's a Gretsch, canary yellow Gretsch, triple floor tom set, like
the
he
black
would play.
dot heads.
Yeah, oh yeah, black dots, absolutely. And he walks up, and people are cheering and loving him and this and that. And waves his hand. Is okay. Well, I'm Tony Williams. This is me. I've done this and this and that, and I do this and that. And I play, Gretsch drums, and I play, Zildjian cymbals, and I don't remember what else. I think he was using Roger sticks at one point, the Super Soul, the big ones. But he kind of talks about all the nuts and bolts, and then he puts the cigar on the floor tom, on the third floor tom. And he just picks up his drumsticks, and he starts with you can't even hear it, this press roll. And he starts with this press roll, and it's the quietest thing. You can't hear it, and all of a sudden, as you know what's going to happen, it gets louder and louder and louder and louder and louder until it's so loud, just a press roll that you're kind of wincing, and you don't want to plug your ears, but it's loud. And then he starts playing all the drums, and he absolutely destroys this drum set. He beats the shit out of it. But with that said, with impeccable technique, right? With power and force. Now, that's one of the other things I should have told you about is how do you reconcile technique and power and force? And I learned a little trick. But so he does this, right? And it's maybe 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, of him just destroying this drum set every which way. He puts the drumsticks down, he picks up a cigar, and he says, "Any questions?" And that was Tony. I mean, literally destroyed this drum set, slaughtered it.
And if people that are listening to this don't know about Tony Williams, a great place to start, if you want to hear that role that Mike just talked about, is the beginning of his album Emergency has a role like that.
Yeah. But you got to listen to
it all. Listen to the stuff with
Fred,
Miles.
Protocosmos, Red Alert, Spock, all those songs that are on the Lifetime, Tony Williams' Lifetime album, Believe It. It's just, you're going to hear technique, you're going to hear precision, you're going to hear swing. Oh, that was the other thing about him. He said this to me, and I thought it was the funniest thing. He said, "I can't shuffle. All these people want me to play shuffles. I can't shuffle." It's like, oh, well, God, Jesus and God himself can't do something. That's big news, It's like, wow. But that was the thing about Tony. He said he couldn't shuffle. He couldn't play
cool.
Right.
Because I wonder if he ever tried and then just decided he wasn't going to do it. Going back to your thing before when you were talking about Frank Beard could only play three beats. Frank Beard can if you put Frank Beard and Tony together, then you've got the complete drummer that can do everything.
He's the king of the shuffle, right?
Yeah. But I think that even someone as virtuosic as Tony acknowledging his limitations is so powerful.
Amazing, right? Yeah, no, I know. That's why I never forgot that. And I'm sure if he said that to me, I mean, at that point I was like a 25-year-old kid or 22-year-old kid, whatever, and he didn't know me from anybody at that point. I'm
Did
sure
he ever
if he
see
told
you
me
play?
that, no. I mean, he might have gotten the record from my cousin. He might have, yeah. Actually, he probably, I can't say he did, but he might have, sure. But that's how I was introduced, was through them. So that was nice. But the thing I wanted to say, though, it's just also a thing about invention or just needing to do something different. Is like when I learned to play the drums, and I was taught this particular technique, this matched grip technique, where you're putting the sticks in the groove, the outer groove of your fingers, like the closest groove that you have in the joint to the tip of your finger.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that particular, it was Benjamin Podemski's, I think, snare drum technique or something. It's a very standard thing.
The fulcrum.
Yeah, the fulcrum with the finger, with the forefinger and the thumb, and then your remaining three fingers. It's out on the outer joint of your finger is gathering and catching the stick. What I did was I moved it one down, all the grooves, to the middle groove of my fingers, and it gave me the same amount of technique and the same amount of control, but it allowed me to play 10 times harder, 100 times harder, as hard as I wanted to, as hard as I could, and not, lose control of A, the stick, and B, the technique also. So that's the thing. Necessity being the mother of invention. For me, that's how it evolved, from the Chuck Brown technique, where the guy's teaching, this particular way of playing to, the way it worked for me in reality. Just another sort of way of, how things might evolve. You know what I mean?
Well, Mike, thank
Yes,
you so much
Joe.
for spending this time with me in the midst of a global crisis. It was a couple hours really well spent that brought some joy to my day, and I think
God,
the people
2
listening
hours.
to this will get a lot out of it too, and I'm really thankful for this time.
Thank you for having me and talking to me and listening to me, and happy editing, if that's your choice.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.